A Maryland school district's gender identity policies are under the microscope this morning, pitting a student's right to privacy against a parent's need to know. The policy says staff cannot reveal a student's gender transition to the student's parents without the student's permission because it could violate federal privacy laws. That's raising questions among some parents. Erika Sanzi with Parents Defending Education joining us this morning to talk more about this issue. Erika, welcome back to the National Desk.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with what is happening there in Montgomery County, Maryland. This guidance was created last September. Basically, it directs staffers to ascertain the level of support, that's a quote, a transitioning student receives from home before informing their parents of their child's desire to change genders. What are school employees doing if a transgender student says they maybe feel unsupported or even unsafe in their own home?
So the trend that we see in Montgomery County and elsewhere is that this is entirely student-led, and so whatever the student says goes. And so in the case of gender transition, if a student decides that they would like to be called it something different, use different pronouns, use different restrooms, locker rooms, etc., all of that happens without the knowledge of the parents. And staff say that they are actually forbidden from telling parents about this as a requirement of their employment.
Yeah, and of course the school says that that's because it could tie into federal privacy laws. One of the questions I guess I have for you is, do you think that the school district would or even should be held liable in the event that divulging information results in a student potentially being thrown out of their home, potentially harming themselves in some way, anything like that?
So first of all, this is obviously quite new, and so there's really not good precedent on the books. I think that we are going to see cases head to court, and we may have better information about, how this is all going to look down the road. But what's important for people to understand is that when they hear school districts or, activists throw around words like harm and danger, school employees are already mandatory reporters. If they believe that a child is truly unsafe or at risk in their own home, they are required by law to report that. We don't see anyone reporting that on this subject. So while it's all fine and good for them to say, well, any parent that doesn't know, it must be because the child doesn't feel safe telling them, and therefore, that's a dangerous home. It's time to call their bluff, because if they really truly believed that, they would be contacting authorities. Instead, it appears what they're doing is really glomming onto gender ideology and then weaponizing it against parents.
So the guidance also addresses staff speech, restroom and locker room access for transgender students, and something called gendered terminology. What does that mean, gendered terminology?
So when I think of gender terminology, we think of words like boy, girl, daughter, son, mother, father, and many districts are moving away from language like that. We actually see in some health education classes where they teach about, body parts, they actually abstain from using the words male and female and instead describe boys and girls based on their body parts. And again, they avoid gendered language. So again, this is a trend. Montgomery County is not alone, but it is something for parents to watch out for as it increases, and grows, not only in their schools, but nationwide.
Yeah, the guidelines say that teachers should work to foster an understanding of gender identity with students who may feel uncomfortable sharing something like a locker room or a restroom with a transgender student. Some teachers may also be uncomfortable explaining it. So I guess what would be the best compromise here to accommodate or work with students and staff who may be uncomfortable in this situation?
Yeah, well, that's the million-dollar question right now, because unfortunately right now what we're finding is that if the student who says that they are trans says that they feel uncomfortable, then everybody is supposed to accommodate that. But when, for example, the girls say that they are not comfortable changing in a locker room where there is also a biological male, their discomfort is not only ignored, but they are basically told that they need to learn more, better understand this, and sometimes we see that they're referred for counseling. So the scale is way off in terms of who's allowed to feel discomfort and whose discomfort is totally ignored. I suspect that what's going to probably need to happen is like in many schools, they have single stall restrooms that are co-ed. Certainly staff have had those forever. And so I'm not quite sure why a bathroom like that wouldn't work for everybody. But at the moment in Montgomery County, a student and staff member, for that matter, can use the bathroom or the locker room that aligns with their gender identity. And it's important to note that they teach that gender is fluid. So they really do say that it's whatever gender that student or staff member identifies with that day.
Yeah, well, obviously it is a topic that still stokes a lot of passion on both sides. And Erika, as always, we do appreciate you joining us here on the National Desk. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.